There's a car out there that doesn't care about your horsepower wars, your turbo stacks, or your launch control systems. It just wants you to drive it. And once you do, nothing else feels the same. That car is the Honda NSX. You know that feeling when you bite into something simple, a perfectly grilled piece of steak, maybe a really good bowl of ramen, and you think, how is this so good? There's no tricks, no 20 ingredients, it's just perfect. That's what driving a first generation NSX feels like. And in a world drowning in 1,000 horsepower hypercars and screens that run your life from the dashboard, the NSX is a reminder that driving used to mean something different, that a car and a driver could talk to each other. But here's what makes the NSX story truly remarkable. It wasn't born in Maranello. It wasn't designed by some Italian genius with a cigarette and a drafting pencil. It came from Honda, the same company making your neighbor's Civic. And not only did it compete with Ferrari, it embarrassed them. So let's go back, all the way back to where this story really starts. It's 1983. Honda is a plucky little economy car brand. The CRX, the Prelude, the Civic, all front-wheel drive, all built to be as cheap and reliable as humanly possible. Honda wasn't cool. Honda was responsible. The car your dad drove because it never broke down. But hidden behind that sensible image was a team of engineers who were quietly helping McLaren conquer Formula One. These were people who knew what a truly great car could feel like, and they were getting restless. So Honda's engineers started doing something unusual on the side. They took a Honda City, one of the least sporty cars ever put on a road, and bolted an engine in the back as an internal engineering experiment, just to understand what a mid-engine layout could actually do. They drove it and were immediately floored. The handling was tight, it was responsive, it was alive. That weird little engineering mule lit a fire that would eventually become the NSX, a supercar whose DNA traces back to a Honda City. You genuinely cannot make this up. Corporate Honda, meanwhile, was setting up the Acura brand for the American market. They needed a halo car, something to walk into the room and say, we are not playing around. But instead of doing the sensible thing, taking an existing car, making it rear-wheel drive, and calling it a sports car, Honda went completely off the deep end. The project lead, Shigeru Wahara, gave his team one target: build a car that beats the Ferrari 328, but make it a Honda, make it reliable, make it practical, make it something you can actually live with. In 1985, that was a revolutionary idea, because Ferraris of that era were not good cars. They were fast and gorgeous and completely insufferable to own. The 328 needed muscle and clenched teeth just to change gear. No power steering, weird pedal placement, and don't even get started on the Countach, a car that looked like a spaceship and drove like a tractor, where the windows didn't open and you made friends with every tow truck driver in the county. Supercars were fast first, stylish second, and reliable. Well, the Italians didn't really have a word for that. Honda was going to change all of that. Wahara's team did something unusual for the era. Instead of just throwing horsepower at the problem, they pulled out graph paper. They plotted every competitive sports car by power-to-weight ratio, wheelbase, and vehicle weight. Every single car fell into the same band on the graph. They called it the Milky Way. Then they plotted a Formula One car. Way out there, alone. That became their target. The NSX would push as close to Formula One balance as a road car could possibly go. To get there, they needed to be clever. Honda had spent years making affordable city cars. They didn't have Ferrari's solution, which was just to bolt a bigger engine in and charge you more. They had to be smart. And the answer came to them on a bullet train. Honda's engineers were riding the Shinkansen back and forth between R and D centers, obsessing over weight savings. When they looked around them, the train was made of aluminum. Nobody had ever built a mass-produced, all-aluminum monocoque production car before. Honda decided they'd be the first. That single decision saved roughly 440 pounds compared to an equivalent steel structure, and quietly revolutionized how the entire automotive industry thinks about materials. Audi, Jaguar, and others would follow years later. An idea born on a train, for a car that would shake the world. But Honda's leadership wasn't satisfied just yet. Early development had explored more modest engine options, even 4-cylinder layouts, before the brief escalated. Honda's president, Tadashi Kumi, pushed hard for the car to feature Honda's new VTEC technology in a 6-cylinder application. The message from the top was clear: this is our halo car. It needs to be the best engine Honda has ever made. Go build it. Thank God they listened. If you've been watching this channel for a while and you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It genuinely helps get this content in front of more people who love cars as much as we do. The C30A engine that followed was something special. A 3-liter dual-cam V6 featuring Honda's VTEC variable valve timing, titanium connecting rods, and a red line that stretched all the way to 8,000 RPM, 270 horsepower in US spec. Japan got 280 PS under the gentleman's agreement that capped domestic output at the time. 0 to 60 in around 5.5 seconds, a top speed of 168 miles per hour. On paper, it sounds modest by today's standards. In 1990, it was a cannon shot aimed directly at Maranello. But before the NSX went to the world, it went to one man first. Ayrton Senna was in Japan testing a McLaren, powered by a Honda engine, naturally, when Wahara's team asked him to come to Suzuka and spend some time with the prototype. You don't say no to that. Senna drove it, got out, and told them the chassis lacked rigidity. That was essentially all he said. The engineers were crushed. They thought they had something perfect. They didn't. The NSX went back under the knife and emerged with chassis stiffness increased by around 50%, with suspension geometry refined using a Cray supercomputer, the same kind of machine NASA used, all because of one conversation with the greatest racing driver who ever lived. When the NSX finally launched at around $60,000, the automotive world simply didn't know what to do with it. The Ferrari 348, it was benchmarked against cost over $100,000. Magazine journalists called the NSX a revelation. Consumers couldn't believe something this elegant, this fast, and this usable was wearing a Honda badge. Ferrari and Lamborghini, who had spent decades selling the idea that speed and suffering were inseparable, suddenly had a problem. Here was a car that matched them on a racetrack, cost half as much, and you could actually see out of it. You could park it on the street. You could take it to a track day and drive it home afterward. The Honda Supercar was an actual good car. What a concept. And here's what's quietly extraordinary about the NSX that gets lost when people talk about specs. It made you a better driver. It didn't hide its limits behind electronics and driver aids. It communicated. The steering talked to your hands. The chassis told you exactly what the rear wheels were doing. When you found the edge, you knew where it was. It demanded attention, it rewarded precision, and it gave you back something that most sports cars of that era simply didn't: confidence. You felt fast because you were in control, not because the car was doing it for you. That's a philosophy, and it's a philosophy that Honda's competitors were eventually forced to adopt. Gordon Murray, the man behind the McLaren F1, the car many consider the greatest of all time, openly cited the NSX as direct inspiration, particularly in how it balanced usability with genuine performance. Ferrari sharpened up. Lamborghini stopped making cars you needed a chiropractor to drive. The entire supercar industry got better because of a V6 from Saitama that nobody saw coming. Today, clean first-generation NSX values are climbing fast. Collectors who slept on them for years are waking up. But honestly, the price is almost beside the point. What matters is what this car represents. It's proof that the best version of anything isn't always the loudest or the most powerful. Sometimes it's the most honest, the most considered, the thing built by people who genuinely loved what they were making and refused to cut a single corner. You can drive an NSX today and feel every single decision those engineers made on that bullet train, on that racetrack with Senna, in those late nights pushing the chassis to its absolute limit. It's all still there, talking to you through the wheel. That's what great cars do. They make you feel something. And the NSX, it never stopped. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe for more deep dives into the cars that actually change things. Drop a comment below. Have you ever driven an NSX? Would you buy one today? Let me know. See you in the next one.